Welcome to the Fit for Halter podcast. I'm your host, Amy Zabel, and we're here to bring content and community to the amateur halter exhibitor. Welcome to episode 13. Friends, today I get to share the mic with Andrea Olsen, breeder and owner at Olsen Paint Horses. She's also an amateur halter exhibitor, and she's bringing a wealth of information about the pillars of their breeding program. Hey, Andrea.
Hey, Amy. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Sure, absolutely. I'm just going to do a little quick introduction here so everybody gets to hear more about you and where you came from. So, Andrea grew up in northern Indiana, and she's been involved with horses all of her life. When she was 5, she got an evil pony and she was hooked. Her parents were not horse people, but encouraged her passion. They insisted she fund the purchases of horses and pay for the shows herself. So, they paid for the feed and hay, and she was responsible for their care. She was a 4-H member and showed grade horses and half Arabs at open shows until she graduated high school. She consistently worked to get better and better stock on a very tight budget. She always had a passion for halter, and when selecting horses, conformation was at the top of her list. In college, she rode on the Purdue equestrian team, worked at a vet clinic, a riding stable, and did several odd jobs to be able to afford riding and keep a horse while in school. After college, she maintained having a horse and showing at local shows as she could, balancing work and life. She negotiated her horse, moving with her in several moves with Purina. Her second to last relocation was to San Diego, California, where she purchased her first American paint horse and started lightly showing paint and pinto shows. Andrea relocated to Texas, purchased land, and was finally able to concentrate on a more focused plan with a purpose. Olsen Paint Horses and their first foal were born in 1998. So, Andrea, what first drew you to paint horses?
Well, Amy, it's kind of interesting. After listening, I've been listening to your podcast here for quite some time, really enjoying them. And it's so amazing the amount of continuity or similarity that I have with a lot of your different guests. Carrie Hansen, you were interviewing the other day, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. I did hunter jumpers. I did, those same kind of things. But for the paint horse, what actually drew me to them was when I was very young, after the evil pony, my first real horse was this grade Tobiano mare, sort of a black and white Tobiano mare that had legs that you couldn't break with a ball peen hammer. She was so cold-blooded, raw bone. But I tell you what, I love that mare to death. She was just the absolute just pinnacle for me at that point in time. And so that's always endeared me to sort of the paint breed and the flashiness. And that's kind of really just going back to that as I, started to embark on being able to ride and do different things like that. I thought, you know what, I just really want to really focus on paints. And so that's what brought me to them.
Gotcha. So, when did you know that you wanted to establish a breeding program?
Well, one of the things when I was younger, I really, really wanted to breed or have, foals at that point. I had a little half Arab mare that I was showing that I really wanted to breed at that point in time with my parents not being horse people and, different things like that. It just really never was in the cards, but it was definitely a passion for me. And then as I, got to Texas when we relocated with the company here to Texas, and really started that was the first thing that I was like, this is what I'm going to do. It's just sort of been a lifelong passion for me. And of course I love mares. I love the attitude and things like that. So it was sort of a natural thing for me to want to gravitate towards breeding.
Yeah. I love the little added tidbit about the mares. They have such a reputation, but man, once you have a mare's heart, it seems like you've got it forever.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been breeding for almost 3 decades and accumulated a wealth of knowledge. Can you tell us about the lessons you've learned as a paint horse breeder?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things, Amy, that I'll first just start saying here, the things that I'm going to visit with you today about, I don't know if these are like tried and true or whatever. What I can tell you is they're the things that I've done. So, I think what the secret sauce is there's, having a goal or an idea in mind, what you wanted to do and have that as your North Star. But in all honesty, I think the whole thing of breeding is sort of part skill, part science, part grit, and part luck. So That's, kind of that being said, with that, really one of the things when I started my breeding program is I wanted to begin with the end in mind. That's kind of professionally how I think about things also for my business life and things like that. I think really, where do I want to be over a period of time? Now, 30 years, and as you probably would imagine, I did start in kindergarten, right? Uh, no, I wish I am that old. Yes, I am that old. But what one of the things that I wanted to do was I really had those North Stars of things like quality versus quantity. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to have, 50 mares or 60 mares just because of trying to balance work with the industry, with horses and things like that. I knew I had to kind of be like this boutique kind of breeder.
Hmm.
I also really wanted to focus on form to function, where I'd have produce a usable horse that was structurally correct, that could go on and do different things. And in the day and age of specialization, it's a little harder to do some of that, but we still need balanced horses. We still need those horses that are structurally correct with good legs. And again, that was a big thing for me. And the last piece here was something that would be marketable, that people would want, that I wouldn't just be producing something that was unique and interesting to me, but something that would have utility for other people. So those were kind of the things with that I started when I began the program, to think about what is that North Star? How do I want to do this?
Yeah. Mm. You mentioned longevity. So, well, in a couple of different ways, you talked about breeding for um, longevity and versatility. So, tell us a little bit more about that. Like, when you think about longevity, how far ahead are you thinking, and what other maybe what other disciplines or functions have you found your horses in later in life after you're done showing them?
Yeah. I've got an interesting story on that. There's a little 2019 gelding that we produced called Cool Intrigue. We showed at the BHF, and he did fairly well up there. But I just saw him up at the Pinto World Show, and a girl was riding him in all around events. So, he's not going to be the sweeping pleasure mover, but he certainly was very, very well, and they did extremely well with that. So from the longevity standpoint, that's what I'm talking about. Is a horse
Hmm.
that can go on and do more than just, look good in a halter pen. I also think it's important, from my perspective, my program, I didn't want to just produce futurity babies. Now, when I first started out, there were lots of futurities. There was Arklatex, there was the Red River futurity, Green Country, just a ton. Those have dwindled down over time. But I wanted to produce horses that could start in the futurity and then go on to be great equine citizens for somebody, either showing halter or, pleasure horse, or, a show horse or something like that. So really looking at something, and as I was selecting the different mares, that really came into play when I was looking at that. So while I was specializing more for halter, obviously,
Hmm.
I would also, as I was selecting mares and looking at that, I would really try to think about, how does that mare move? Is she move like a Sherman tank, or does she actually, kind of, can you get around and have a little bit of athleticism to her?
Uh-huh.
And so that was part of the criteria. It was not the sole criteria on the mares, but
Sure.
that was a definite factor that I was thinking about as I was putting those the mares together in terms of what I wanted to have for my program.
Hmm. So you've started a little bit about this, but tell us more. How do you go about selecting your mares?
So my program, as I was thinking about doing the program, is I wanted to, I didn't have the ability to have a ton of horses, as I mentioned earlier. So my strategy was I was going to buy a young horse, show it, build up the show record, and really sort of vet it out, if you will. Is it going to make it through to the 3-year-old year when I'm going to breed it, or do that type of thing? And really think about that mare from that perspective. And then if she met criteria of disposition, did she, is she structurally sound, were her legs good, that kind of stuff, I would turn her into a brood mare for my program, and then
Hmm.
somebody would have to go. I was constantly trying to trade up on mares with that. But as I'm thinking about selection, the overall package of the mare was really important to me. The breeding also in terms of pedigree, um,
Mhm.
I didn't want to boil the ocean. I wanted to have a little bit more tailored and focused approach. So there were certain bloodlines that I really gravitated to that I felt that I could get a handle on how they crossed. One of those was Mighty Awesome. And as you
Mm.
know, I mean, a major foundation sire within the paint breed or whatever.
Mhm.
I had my initial mares were Mighty Awesome bred. And matter of fact, I've got fourth generation mare that is from that original cross on one of those Mighty Awesome mares that's in my pasture right now. I'm working on hopefully getting a fifth generation from her. But as I was selecting, those were things I looked at. I really tried to focus in on the genetics and think about how do these mares cross? I used futurities a lot to look at what crosses I liked. I would go and look at babies there. I would also go to Keith and Sherry Tittles, who own Mighty Awesome, and they had a lot of really nice mares. I would go and kind of look and see what he was crossing on that I liked, that kind of fit the criteria that I was looking for. Then futurities and so forth. And that's how I would then kind of figure out about studs that I would want to use for different mares on that. But again, for the mare picking portion, a lot kind of went into that. But I really had a long runway with them that I bought them when they were young, showed them, and then said, okay, yeah, I think we're going to test this mare and see if she works. And certainly if they bombed out or didn't miss that, I would go ahead and sell them or, put them else in somebody else's program
Mhm.
that was better suited for what she was.
Sure. You mentioned going to futurities and using a futurity as a way to see babies. We have talked about that in a couple of other episodes where the decrease in the number of futurities that are just available, even for somebody to go shop. But I hadn't considered that before, that um, a futurity is a great place to look at a variety of things, including, what's being produced by a particular stallion, or even developing your own personal taste or eye for certain crosses. So when you go to a futurity, whether you're an exhibitor or just going to watch, like what kinds of things are you consciously looking for that maybe somebody else might have not considered?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know that I'm that smart. I mean, what I do is I kind of look and figure out what do I like. What I do is
Sure.
like, especially like BHF and WCHA, they
Uh-huh.
have programs that have the mare side on there, which of course what I'm interested in. So what I'll do is I'll find mares that are similarly bred to the
Okay.
two or three mares that I have, and then I'll look at what
Mm.
they were bred to, and then I'll look at the babies because that gives me a little bit more of a hopefully a predictability. Now, certainly you can look at a sire's get what they're throwing, right? Like great backs, great hocks, pretty head, neck, whatever. You could kind of see that. But as we
Hmm.
all know, we're dealing with hybrids with these horses, meaning that, you've got multiple different generations. They're not necessarily line bred. And so that lends itself to some unpredictability and variability that could really kind of throw things off. So if you can see more crosses, that are out there, that gives you a little bit better idea, or at least it gave me a better idea of, how predictable is that horse going to be on this type of mare? Am I seeing something that I really like or I don't like, or, those kind of things.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, I've noticed that we talk about stallions a lot. We see stallions advertised. So much emphasis seems to be placed um, on the stallion. We don't necessarily talk a lot or publicize, you know, we don't stand mares, right? So tell me a little bit about how you've touched on it somewhat, but how you select a stallion versus, you know, or I guess in looking at your herd of mares.
Yeah. So the criteria that's important to me personally, I like a clean panel horse. So that's one consideration. Now that doesn't
Hmm.
mean that I haven't bred to different panel horses,
Sure.
but that's kind of something that's important to me. Also, futurity entries are what are they in? Again, being a small breeder and looking at, how do you cash flow this thing? How do you make it worthwhile, you've got to have the income source from futurities. You can't just anymore stand on the sale of the baby. You've really got to have additional income streams to kind of help you with
Hmm.
that. And so because of that, um, I've really look at stallions that are in a lot of the different futurities, both paint and of course BHF and WCHA. If
Hmm.
they are in those, that's definitely a check plus for me in
Hmm.
terms of selecting that. Also, something that's important to me is the stallion manager or the place that they're standing. That's kind of overlooked by some people. I've noticed over the years, there's a wide variety of different, people abilities to stand stallions and do different things and stuff like that. I personally have always found that there's a handful of people that are just, heads and tails above everybody else in terms of providing great semen, the culture's clean, that
Hmm.
that you're getting great service with, that they'll follow up, they'll make good on things, because stuff does happen. FedEx,
Sure.
a couple of years ago, we were hitting the perfect storm when the Midwest was storming, and every shipment I got, there was thunderstorms and it was too late. So but the stallion owner worked with me, and those kind of things are important. So I also want to look at, is this a place that is reputable, somebody that is good in the industry, that can provide, good service. And I know things happen, so I'm not saying I'm looking for panacea, but it's
Sure.
important to me as to, the stallion manager working with you. And it's not about discounts. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just being real honest, working with them, giving you good semen and providing you, as best service as they can on
Hmm.
that. So those are the big things that I'm kind of looking at for studs. And I'll tell you, I do have a lot of respect for the people that stand stallions. It's a very, very difficult thing. I mean, with all the
Yeah.
futurities, everything else, and again, my selection here is being in futurities. These folks have to spend a lot of money to get these horses in it. And I'm extremely appreciative. And I don't want to be, one of those people that, is a more kind of thing with the studs, but I understand their position, and I'm extremely appreciative of those, stallion owners that put their horses in as many different things as they can.
Hmm.
And I try and do my part in, with the baby, and make sure that the baby is really decent, get them out, and that they're broke, and that I can provide, again, showcasing for that stallion manager,
Hmm.
somebody looking and saying, hey, that horse is, kid coolcified bred, paint mare, and this, and so they can do the same thing that I'm doing.
Hmm.
So hopefully I can provide at least value back.
Yeah, it does sound a lot like a partnership where you have the mare owner who has to make her investment, stallion owner has to make the investment, and then of course that baby comes along, and it really takes all three components to seek success going forward for the next generation.
Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I always had a friend that said the cheapest part about owning a horse is the stud fee. So that's why I don't try and, jack around with the trying to get discounted stud fees or whatever. I'm respectful of that.
Yeah. That's like the purchase price, right? It's
Exactly.
yeah, those are
Yeah,
rarely the painful ones. It's that ongoing surprise trip to the vet or you name it.
exactly. Exactly.
Um, so when you think about a mare versus a stallion, how would you say maybe in percentages or some other measurement the amount of influence that a mare has on a baby versus the stallion has on a baby?
Well, genetics would say 50-50, right?
Uh-huh.
I'm probably a little bit more old school. I think the
Okay.
mirror has a little bit more to offer, not necessarily in terms of the genetic makeup, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of disposition, because those
Mm-hmm.
babies are with those moms for, 4 months. We keep them on for 4 months before we wean. And they learn a lot from the mare. And if we're working the mare and doing different things with her around the place, and she's quiet, the baby sees that and is also
Mm-hmm.
quiet. And, just doing different things like that, taking the mare back for rechecks or whatever. I think the mare gives that a little bit to the baby.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah. It makes
But,
sense. She
I guess
has
obviously I'm a mare person here, so I'm gonna tout them a little bit. more.
That's all
So we'll,
right.
we'll give them 51% and 49 for the stallion.
They deserve their moment. Even the
We'll give
redheaded
them.
spicy ones.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Even red-headed spicy ones.
Oh, goodness. So, we touched a little bit earlier about longevity of the horse itself, bringing versatility into the picture so that after the halter season or showing is done, that horse still can move on to its next job. What about ensuring success of the long term of your breeding program itself? Are
Mhm.
there any kind of safe holds or things that you consider in the sustainability of what you're doing?
Yeah. For me, my thought is always to think about don't let good be the enemy of great.
Mm, that's so
So
good. Is that a
what
Jim
happens?
Collins?
Yeah.
Sounds like a Jim Collins phrase, but I digress.
So what that says to me is I may have like a really good producing mare, or she may be fourth generation of my program. So I've got a lot of vested interest in here. But if she's not consistently outproducing herself, it's at that
Mm,
point that I need to make a tough decision. Because again, I can't keep them all. And I need to think that, hey, this horse could maybe work in somebody else's program. Because again, as I mentioned before, I like clean panel horses. So sometimes if you're going clean panel to clean panel, you can get slider horses, and those horses may work better on an NH or a P mare or what or P stud or whatever, right?
mm-hmm,
So I'm not saying they don't have utility, they just may not have utility for mine. Also, as I continue to try and evolve my program and just continue to make the best product or baby that I can make, is that I've got to look at trends, but I don't
mm-hmm,
follow trends. I look more at where that trend is potentially going. And what that
okay.
looks like, I guess a few years ago, hawks just became really just the fajizzle, right? Of everybody wanted posty hawks. Well,
Right.
to me, from that standpoint, is paint horses, admittedly, have had some horrible hawks. There's some, in the past, and we're starting to get those cleaned up. They're starting to look a lot better now. But I saw that extreme trend is going is like, this is not going to, it's not sustainable. They're going to break
Mm-hmm,
down in their pasterns and back. It's just, it wasn't sustainable. However, I recognize the longer implications of that. And I'm like, I got to get hocks cleaned up. I've got to get better hocks on my horses. And so I started then looking at studs that maybe were throwing a little bit straighter hock, not terribly posty, but straighter, trying to clean my mares up. And I think I've done a fairly good job. I'm happy with where my hawk angle is at on the mares that are the babies that I'm producing right now. They may not be posty enough for some, but again, I don't think it's sustainable. And again, looking at that form to function, it doesn't fit that requirement that I personally have for form to function with that. So
mm-hmm.
I hope that kind of answers it for you.
Yeah. Yeah. If somebody's not familiar with what form to function means, can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. First off, you can go to WCHA website, and they've got great resources there. If you want to
Mm-hmm.
see stuff and things like that, I'd say that's a great resource. And WCHA, if you're not involved, please make sure you do get involved, because they are for the little guy like us. They are for
Yeah.
us.
Yeah.
But what I mean to form to function is that if you look at an animal and divide them into thirds, okay? If you
Mm-hmm.
take a horse and you divide them into thirds, are they balanced? Does the front half from the shoulders forward kind of match with the middle and then the back half, or is there one that's heavier than the other? Do they do that? Are the angles good? What's their shoulder angle? Is it really upright, or is it a nice 45-degree angle where they're going to have a nice sweeping stride? What's their croup like? Is their croup super steep where that's going to cause some issues or problems with movement? So what you're looking at form to function is you want a balanced horse. And again, they call it a trapezoid. If you think about the
Mm-hmm.
horse, just the body of the horse with the shoulder and the croup angle, you want that to be a nice 45-degree angle, and then you've got a top line that goes across the back, and then of course the long underline on there. So you've kind of got like a cutoff triangle, if you will, or whatever. If any of those pieces are out of angle, that's going to in some cases hamper that horse's ability to perform certain tasks, or to get his hind legs underneath himself if he's loping, or to be able to, if the shoulder angle's off, to say sound, or be able to stop and turn quickly, things like that. So each one of these things, the angles on the horse are not just there because we think they're pretty. They're there because they legitimately have, physiological things that they do that allow the horse to be able to move and perform athletically. And when you start messing with those, that can mess the soundness of the horse up over time, causing additional stress, different things like that. And it also
Mhm.
makes them maybe not as pretty of a mover.
Okay. So then it really speaks to the idea that if the breeder is thinking about longevity for the horse, not just the program or the other elements of the breeding scenario, but thinking about the horse and its future, if form to function is a priority, then soundness becomes more successful or more possible on the long term as it transitions from a halter career to, say, a ranch career or school horse career, whatever the next step is for that animal. That
Yeah,
really um, ties the two together, most
yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, it's good. I feel like in some ways our industry has held unnecessarily. People think that halter horses can't ride, don't have a future. Um, yeah, but they're a horse, right? They're
exactly.
rideable and usable for a variety of things. And especially, I think about as often as we show and the places we go, and um, gosh, they usually have a lot of miles on them by the time, as far as exposure is concerned,
Sure.
seeing and doing things and being handled. Gosh, we handle them, groom them, work with them so much.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of your greatest joys as a breeder?
I really, my model is to really kind of show them up until their 2-year-old year, and then I sell them to someone else that can hopefully show them and enjoy them or whatever. So my greatest joys are just, one, I love to show, and it's even more special showing a horse that I've, bred and produced and brought up and has, hopefully thoughtfully produced on that.
Mm-hmm.
That gives me a
Mm-hmm.
lot of joy. And it's one of the things I think about, in terms of joy. It's not necessarily the winning, although I like that, so don't get me
Sure.
wrong. But if I were to set out to be, that was my goal, was to win, I think I would be really, really sorely disappointed. One, because I don't think I would have that sort of longer vision with my program. And
Mm-hmm.
then two, I would probably be producing horses that again probably would be extreme in some areas and not necessarily hit that form to function on there. So
Mm-hmm.
just seeing my horses in the show pen, showing them. And then I really do get a lot of joy when I've placed a horse with somebody that just goes on and just, hits it out of the park with them. I absolutely love that, because again, that's affirmation of that longer ability. Like I said, the cool intrigue horse, that it just made me, I was just like smiling from ear to ear that horse was bringing so much joy to the lady that was showing him and just enjoying him.
Mm-hmm.
So those are really the bigger things for me, that's just about, taking that animal and showing it, and then having others enjoy what I've produced.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of sappy,
Um,
sorry.
oh, all good. Totally understandable. We are emotionally attached, and there's a lot of heart connection to what we do, most definitely. Um, yeah, I can relate to that. So when you think about, you mentioned the horse that you saw at Pinot World being ridden and shown. What are some of your favorite crosses and why?
Well, for me, my absolute favorite is the Mighty Awesome on a cool skip. And that takes on a lot
Okay.
of different forms, right? So one of my favorite horses that I produced was that model, a mare that I first bought, my first big time mare that I actually spent a fair amount of money on, and started the program with her as a thing. Bred her to Totally Cool, and he was Cool Skip bred, right? And I had seen Cool Skip horses bred on Mighty Osses at Keith and Cherries, and I'd seen them also at other futurities and stuff. And it was
Hmm.
kind of horse I liked. And we just absolutely hit a great cross on that thing, and the colt ended up winning the world a couple of times. We had sold him after a weanling year and went on to win a lot. But it was that cross, and so then I continued to work that cross. And again, I'm still working hybrid here, so there's some variability in that, but working with the Mighty Awesome, the Cool Skip. Then I went after Teetotally Cool. I really then transitioned to Kid Coolsified. Steve Jensen had him, and of course, then the Franks had ownership there as well with them. But working with Julie Leake, talking about stallion managers, oh
Hmm.
my God, she's just incredible,
Yeah.
phenomenal. And so we worked a lot. We had a lot of crosses with that Kid Coolsified on my Mighty Awesome mares, and had a lot of success. And it was producing a paint horse that looks a lot like the quarter horses now, that are a little bit more modern, the high neck coming
Uh-huh.
out, real
Hmm.
pretty kind of profiling horses with that. So that's really kind of my favorite go-to type cross now. Um, with Kid Coolsified gone now, there's a couple other horses that are out there that are coming on, that I've got my eyes on, that I've kind of been thinking about looking at taking that next step with my fourth generation mare, to see where
Hmm.
that takes her, because she's a Mighty Awesome Kid Coolsified. And so now I'm kind of looking at what's going to be the next step for her. I'm still thinking on that one.
Okay. Um, let's talk a little bit about the breeding season. Um, there's a distinct season typically. And when we look at like the stallions that are available, the book opens February 1, book closes sometimes June 30. So, or before, depending on the stallion and all the variables that go into that breeding season. So when you think about that having kind of a distinct beginning and end, when do you recommend, if I have a mare and I'm considering breeding her, when should I start thinking about um, selecting my stallion, communicating with that breeding stallion manager? What kind of rhythm would you recommend for somebody who's new at it?
Okay. There's a lot with this, a lot to unpack on
Sure.
that. So help keep me on course here as I go through this one. Um, so if you're first thinking about it and you've done your homework, I would say, like prior year, go to the futurities, know
Okay.
what your mare is, right? And then start looking at mares that are bred similarly to yours, and seeing what crosses you like on the stallions. And start then, honing down to getting into a selection of three to four studs that you're very interested to think about, and then do a little bit further research on that. In terms of looking at you can go online and look at what other get have done and different things like that. Look at what futurities they're in, different things, whatever your criteria are with that. So really do a good vetting with that. Also, talk to your veterinarian about your mare's soundness. Is she, what do you need to do from that standpoint? Work with your veterinarian closely to make sure that your mare will be ready to breed. So these things are all happening sort of up
Mm-hmm.
before we get to this situation. And as you come down on your final, breeding or deciding on what sire you want, I really like to book and have my studs done by January. Of
Okay.
course, February 1st is when we typically start breeding on that, and
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk just a little bit more about getting your mare ready for that.
Sure.
But I really like to have everything. I'm kind of anal about stuff, so I really like to have things buttoned up. So really by January, I want to have that. Some stallion owners will provide early booking discounts or different things like that. If that's important to you, futurities or different things, you can typically, the stallion auctions are going to be around that period of time as well.
Okay.
So, thinking about doing that perspective. So done your homework ahead of time, and then, really narrow it down, and then by January, really have where you want to go. Also, secondly, is when do you want that baby to be born? What are you going to
Mm-hmm.
do with it, right? So for me personally, I want them as close to January 1st without going before that, obviously, as I can get them. So my sweet spot is January 15th, but mares are mares. You can't always get what you hope for here on this, but that's really what I want to. But I know I've got friends that live in Michigan that may not have like robust facilities that they're like, hey, I'm going to wait till March to have a baby or whatever. So you can work with your veterinarian as well on that as to timing or whatever, but think critically about that. I mean, if you don't have a nice place to full out a baby or a veterinary hospital where you can take your mare to full them out or a fulling center where they can full out,
Mm-hmm.
be realistic. You don't probably want to have a baby drop in January if you don't have the facilities to take care of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that being said, that aside, think about when you want that baby. So from that perspective, then a mare's gestation is 11 months. It takes 11 months to cook a kid. Okay. So then you need to count backwards from that and think about it. But all the while, you need to have a mare that's cycling. So
Mm-hmm.
that's going to help you to understand when you want to get that mare cycling. And again, if work with your veterinarian will definitely help you on this. But like for me, we want to have those January babies. So we start our mares under lights. We use the Equilume system. We've used it for years now, and it's fantastic. That's just a light source that goes on the mare, wears like a little mask. And
Okay.
we start that at the week of Thanksgiving. And they wear that. And I've never had a mare that hasn't started to cycle that wasn't ready to breed by February 1st with that. So, but obviously if you want to go to March, then you're going to wait a little bit longer before you start that mare under lights, that type of thing. So you've got to do a little bit of thinking about when you want that to happen and then get your mare under lights and going. You'll want to make sure that before you get your mare bred, that the mare culture's clean, that again, working with your veterinarians, I can't stress it enough. You need to work with your veterinarian closely on this kind of stuff. And have your mare culture clean, make sure that you're set up and ready to go with that. And then, work with the stallion manager. Communication is super, super important from that perspective. So
Mm-hmm.
that's just like maybe a quarter of the stuff, but that's kind of the basics things that you,
Yeah.
I think, need to think about or do before you get the mare bred.
Thank you for that. That was like a micro masterclass on that cycle of decision making. That was awesome. Thank you. I feel like I'm just leaning in, listening super closely. It's great. Um, so, um, do you have like a favorite memory when you talk about or when you think about we've talked a little bit about your favorite cross. What about a favorite memory, whether it was showing or at home, just over the course of the years? Anything you can think of, anything that comes to mind?
This is going to be a little more general, but it's the same every time. Fulling out the babies. Now
Mm.
we have the full alert system, we've got all of that, so we can do it here. I travel a fair amount for my real job, so we end up, sending them to the veterinary hospital, Riata Equine that we use, and they full
Mm-hmm.
out for us now. But just seeing that baby for the very first time is just always just it's like your dream realized, right? You're waiting 11 months and you're so excited about the cross, the anticipation, the just like the sheer like what's it gonna be? Am I gonna
Uh-huh.
get color? Is it a colt or a filly? And unfortunately, we've had lots of colts. I seem to get more colts than fillies. I blame my veterinarian for that, so I constantly tease them about it. But it's just that excitement of when that
Mhm.
mare foals and just seeing the realization of your dream. I'll tell you, Amy, there's nothing like it for me. That just lights me up, and I've got chill bumps right now thinking about it.
Awesome. So good. So good. How many mirrors do you have on at a given time?
3.
So you've
That's
only got
it.
3 babies coming on average per year.
On average, I do one baby a year. On
One baby a
average.
year. Okay.
And we'll shut down breeding if we're not getting the early baby, we'll shut down breeding. So like this year, don't have a baby because it just got too late, and we had a lot of, like I mentioned, there was some problems with shipping and different things due to storms. That was not the stallion manager's fault, it was Mother Nature's fault, that
Uh-huh.
kind of stuff. So that's it. We do one. I mean, years ago we would do a couple of babies at a time. But
Okay.
again, like this is like very boutique, very focused. And I don't breed a mare back to back. So we'll cycle through and
Okay.
do let the mare off after she had the baby, she gets a year off, and then we'll either breed her back or she gets another year off. So it's tiny.
Yeah. Tiny but mighty. So the years that you don't have a baby coming, do you go out and buy a baby to show so that you can keep that muscle kind of flexing a little bit?
I do. Last
Okay.
year, I went out in Cool Ranch. I bought a filly, KR Sweet Dreams.
Okay.
The Horn was there at that point in time, hook
Uh-huh.
me up with what I call her Lolly, and she's
Okay.
going to hopefully be a future broodmare of mine. Again, going through the process, buy the baby, and then see,
Sure.
disposition and everything else, where are
Hmm.
they at, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, if I don't, I still have that itch I got to scratch with the showing.
Right. Yeah.
I currently have a 2-year-old gelding that I'm showing right now that we did breed and produce, and so he's going to be hopefully going to a new home here soon to be shown and so forth. He's up on the docket there for that. But yeah, we will purchase and
Okay.
buy, just because again, I get a lot of joy from showing and just enjoy it, and the people, the community. It's just I'm so endeared and so just blessed to be a part of it.
Yeah. Agreed. I feel the same. Um, how do you hope to make an impact on the halter industry?
Amy, I don't know that I'm little old me with my one horse a year is going to make an impact. But what I would hope is that people can kind of see, I mean, they've seen me for showing for a while. I've been out there for quite a while showing, that hopefully it inspires them that they can do it. That, you know
Mhm.
what, I may not have, 50 high-powered mares, but I've got two really good ones. And that you can make an impact, and that you can do something that is special for you, that's something that nobody else could do, that you could focus that. So that's kind of what I hope, that just somebody thinks, yeah, I can do that too, and they
Yeah.
can, and they
Yeah.
can.
So, along those same lines, when you think about being an amateur exhibitor yourself, going out there and showing, what are a couple of pieces of advice you would give to somebody who's never shown before, maybe at the breed level? What are some words of wisdom you would give somebody?
um One, do
Mm,
it. That's going to be my first and foremost. Do it. Figure out by hook or crook of how to do it. But I would also say, set yourself up for success. Find a good trainer at first. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't do DIY, do it yourself. You can. But I think at first, as you're getting into the groove and understanding the rhythm of the industry and showing and things like that, having somebody kind of hold your hand and help you is really, I think, setting yourself up to have a good experience. And
mhm.
what then you do is you learn, right? You're being taught basically. Hey, this is what
Sure.
we do. This is the breed shows. This is how it goes. This is how we get a horse prepared. Learn, drink it in, understand that, and really figure out the fine nuances and enjoy that. And then once you kind of get that under your belt and kind of get the newbie thing off of you and moving forward, I'd say then sort of venture out. If you do want to be that DIY or that do it yourself person, you doggone sure can.
Mhm.
That there's I've seen tons of horses shown at the breed level, at the local level of the breed shows and things like that, where people fit them themselves. But I think at first, just to help you learn. I mean, it's the problem with the experience, right? Is that you take the test before you learn the lesson, right? So let's see if we can learn the lesson here before we take the test. And I think that probably would help you a little bit have it more enjoyable. Also,
Yeah.
you've got somebody helping you with getting the horse there, doing stuff, so you can really be in the moment and just take it all in and enjoy how they're getting or learn how they're getting the horse ready. What are the things they do? Those types of things. So that'll make you a better showman or a better person, a DIYer, as you move along.
Mm-hmm. It's good. Anything else you want to share with our audience?
I don't know, Amy. I appreciate so much, and I've enjoyed our time here visiting together. So I don't know that I have anything. Like I said, my preface of the thing as we went out of this at the beginning is like, hey, I don't know if this is right. It's kind of what I do. So,
Sure.
if it kind of helps somebody with that, by no means am I saying this is the only way to do
Mm-hmm.
it. It's just kind of what
Yeah.
I've done in my little world.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, and I know that people will enjoy hearing your story and hearing how, even in a small way, you're making a big impact on the industry. Just thank you for sharing your expertise and infusing us with some new ideas, some new thoughts, and some encouragement on just getting out there to show. So, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. I appreciate that.
Hey, if you're an amateur or a professional willing to share your story or bring content that helps us with our halter horses, you can email me at fitforhalter@gmail.com.